Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Saturday the 25th of February 2023. Sovereignty. Newly gazetted central bank bill proposes setting up of a new governing board in order to ensure full autonomy. 11-member monetary policy board to be established in order to replace the monetary board. Health is wealth. President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that he held discussions to bring down more medicines to Sri Lanka under the Indian credit line, and that a new health insurance scheme will be implemented for the country.
With the growth of private hospitals, some form of a health insurance, where the government also picks up the tab for those who are in the lower income category. That's a matter on which we will be having discussions.
No change. Trade Union Collective of Professionals says that they will carry out the series of protests from the 1st of March onwards, expressing displeasure over the outcome of the meeting with the President today. Loopholes. Tax experts warn that tax evasion will be rampant in the country if not regulated properly.
Definitely, if you take a number of taxpayers and you multiply it by a tax rate and you expect that and you paint everybody with that same brush, certainly evasion would be rampant.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Usas pelata paso qualify bemu ihalata yamu jaya aragamu promotion ekata ilanga දාගත්තොත් ඩිග්‍රිය ගොඩ
ජාතික කළමනාකරන ආයතනය NIPM වෙතින් රාජ්‍ය වගකීම සහ ලෝපිලිගත් උපාධියක් තරුණ ඔබට Be smart, be qualified, be recognized with NIPM ජාතිය වැවිලි සරසවිය.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In your top story for tonight, the new central bank bill prepared and gazetted has proposed for the setting up of a 7-member governing board in order to ensure the sovereignty of the financial regulator in the country. This move comes as part of a requirement that has been stipulated by the International Monetary Fund among a host of other reforms needed in order for Sri Lanka to receive approval for the $2.9 billion bailout package. Now, the new bill also replaces the existing monetary board and proposes the setup of a new monetary policy board. Sri Lanka needs to introduce a host of new measures within the country if it is to receive the $2.9 billion through the International Monetary Fund's Extended Fund Facility. Ensuring the independence of the central bank of the country is one such requirement. To this extent, the government prepared a new central bank bill recently so as to enact it once passed in Parliament. As such, the new bill gazetted by the Parliament states that the autonomy of the central bank shall be respected at all times, and no person or entity shall cause any influence on the governor of the central bank or the member of the governing board and monetary policy board or employees of the central bank in the exercise, performance and discharge of their powers, duties and functions under this act or interfere with the activities of the central bank. The bill also sets a premise for the new central bank that will be governed under the new law to establish a governing board which will be responsible for overseeing the administration, management and determining the general policy of the central bank. The governing board is tasked with these responsibilities apart from its usual role of determining the country's monetary policy. The new governing board of the central bank will comprise of 7 members. This includes the governor of the central bank, who shall be the chairperson of the governing board, and 6 other members who possess the expertise in economics, banking, finance, accounting, auditing, law or risk management. The new bill also proposes for the establishment of the Monetary Policy Board, replacing the Monetary Board that is currently in existence. The proposed Monetary Policy Board will comprise the Governor of the Central Bank as the chairperson of the board, the 6 members of the Governing Board, 2 experts in economics or finance, the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank in charge of price stability, and the Deputy Governor of the Central Bank in charge of financial system stability. However, the Secretary to the Treasury and Ministry of Finance, who is currently a member of the Monetary Board, has not been included as a member that should be part of the proposed Monetary Policy Board. Further, the President must seek the approval of the Constitutional Council when appointing members to the Governing Board and the Monetary Policy Board of the Central Bank. In the meantime, the Monetary Policy Board is also tasked with providing the Parliament with a report should the Central Bank fail to meet the inflation target for 2 consecutive quarters, and also provide the remedial measures as well.
Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe stated that yesterday he intends to discuss the introduction of a health insurance mechanism where the government picks up the tab for low-income earners requiring private health care. He further stated that it was agreed to import more medicines under the Indian credit line. The President made these remarks at an event held in Katunayake yesterday.
The inauguration ceremony of the 6th annual academic session of the Sri Lanka College of Military Medicine under the theme of Resilience of Military Medicine in Times of Crisis was held in Katunayake yesterday under the patronage of President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
While you are here to discuss resilience in military medicine in times of crisis, I have to, on the other hand, to think of medicine in the times of economic crisis. Today, before I came here, I ensured that under the Indian credit line that we could be able to get more medicine. And now we are working on making more foreign exchange available to the medical sector. Now this alone is not sufficient to train our medical personnel. I've discussed with the Ministry of Health the need to upgrade the MRI into one of the best medical research laboratories in the region. We should ourselves have a good laboratory, a series of laboratories to carry out our own research. With the growth of private hospitals and people wanting access to private hospitals, some form of a health insurance where the government also picks up the tab for those who are in the lower income category. That's a matter on which we will be having discussions in the coming year, this year and next year. We are looking at paying wards in government hospitals. And I also want to introduce non-paying wards in private hospitals where the government will take the tab for the treatment that is given in those non-paying wards. Planning to send to help out in Turkey. We originally had a group going out to Nepal. These are in times of natural disaster. But I'm looking at the possibility of using our military medical personnel to send abroad when the people are faced with health disasters. And that takes place more often than natural disasters. I will certainly discuss with you all the formation of a unit that can be made available. So we have the experience, and it's only fair that we make our services available to other countries which may not have had our experience.
Now, National People's Power leader Anurakumara Dissanayake pledges to provide necessary facilities required by industrialists and entrepreneurs to develop their businesses under a government of the NPP. He made these remarks addressing an election campaign rally held in Ratnapura recently. The leader of the B team is constantly mentioning the NPP and JVP at their political rallies. He claims that the corporates will be doomed under an NPP ruling. Are there any properly functioning corporates in this country? Nowadays, all the corporates are in danger. Some claim that if the NPP comes to power, we will take away people's vehicles and rent them out. These are absurd statements. Nowadays, people have to get fuel for their vehicles using the QR codes. Even though people have vehicles, they are unable to finance the lease installments. Half of the salary earned by the people in private sectors is taken by the government. The NPP is the government which will provide the necessary contribution and facilities needed by the industrialists and entrepreneurs to develop in this country. Now, leader of the Samagi Janabala Veg in the meantime, Sajith Premadasa claims that his party will take all necessary steps to ensure that the local government election is held. Speaking at an election campaign rally in Valioya, Premadasa refuted claims made by the president regarding the request by the opposition to postpone the election.
Samagi Janabala Vegeta Jayaveva.
An election campaign rally of the Samagi Janabala Vegaya got underway in Valioya yesterday under the patronage of its party leader Sajith Premadasa.
During the time period of an election, even the preschool children are aware of that. The only person who claims that there is no election is the president of the country. When the UNP handed over cash bonds for the local government polls, wasn't the president, who is also the leader of the party, aware of it? Now he claims that the opposition requested him to postpone the election. It's the president, the prime minister and the people who destroyed the country who wants to postpone the election. The SJB is the only party that claims it is a must to hold the local government election.
Now, in the meantime, the trade union collective of professionals claims that their demands were not met at the meeting that was held today with President Ranil Wickremesinghe, organised to discuss the government's new tax policy. Speaking to media following the discussion, the professionals announced that they will proceed with their trade union action until the demands are met.
A meeting between the trade union representatives and President Ranil Wickremesinghe was held this morning at the Presidential Secretariat office. Representatives of 40-member trade unions of the Professionals Trade Union Collective took part in the discussion. The meeting was reportedly held in order to discuss the government's new tax policy. Meanwhile, speaking to the media following the discussion, the Secretary of the Government Medical Officers Association, Dr. Haritha Aludge, announced that they will continue with their trade union action.
Matters were discussed in a friendly manner. The expected demands were not met at the conclusion of the meeting. The President noted that revising taxes before reaching a final agreement with the IMF can have a negative impact. But we do not accept this. If we implement these alternative proposals that do not harm the government revenue, perhaps we can earn more tax revenue than the current revenue generated by the government. We presented this in a very scientific and technical manner with statistics. The President diligently listened to the matters raised and admitted that our proposals are fair. It was agreed to provide us with another date for discussions next week. The President invited us professionals to join the discussions carried out with the IMF representatives. We have not reached a decision on that matter yet. We believe that we did not receive a positive response to call off the series of protests planned to be launched on the 1st of March. We will continue our trade union actions until the demands are met.
Now, Samagi Janabalawege MP Mayantha Dissanayake has decided to step down as the chairman of the Committee of Public Finance in Parliament just 2 days after his appointment. The parliamentarian informed his decision to the SJB's General Secretary Ranjith Madhumabandara. Parliamentarian Mayantha Dissanayake was picked for the position of chairman of the Committee of Public Finance in Parliament by the Parliament's Committee of Selection on Thursday. Nevertheless, a rift in the opposition was created when parliamentarian Harsha De Silva claimed foul play over the new appointment. He alleged that all government MPs in the Committee of Selection in the Parliament endorsed this appointment, overruling his nomination. This issue also led to a heated debate in Parliament yesterday. Now, the Department of Meteorology today issued an advisory on thunder showers and lightning activity in several parts of the country during late hours of the day. Accordingly, thunder showers accompanied by severe lightning are likely to occur at several places in the Sabaragamu province and in Kaluthara, Kol and Mathura districts in the afternoon or at night. Meanwhile, fairly heavy showers above 50 millimeters are likely in the eastern province and in the Mullaitivu district. The department advises the general public to take adequate precautions to minimize damages caused by lightning activity. Welcome back. Now, as protests raged on against the allegedly unjust tax policy of the Sri Lankan government, tax experts, economists and activists raised concern whether Sri Lankan corporates are taxed proportionately to its individuals. Speaking on the matter to AdaDerana tax expert Sulaiman Nishtar revealed that a detailed mathematical analysis has to be done on each business sector's ability to pay to avoid disastrous consequences.
A spate of protests were held recently against the purportedly unjust tax policy of the government. The government maintains that the tax revisions are an important prerequisite to the IMF bailout package, which is pivotal for Sri Lanka's economic resurgence. However, many claim that there is more room to reduce the burden recently placed on individuals via increased personal income taxes by hiking the corporate tax rates further.
Corporates are not grumbling on taxes because the corporate rates have gone from 24 to 30%. Huge profits that have been reported by the corporates, whether they have been taxed enough is one question.
Currently, the standard corporate tax rate in Sri Lanka is 30%, increased from 24% effective from the 1st of October 2022. Speaking to AdaDerana English News on the matter, partner at Ernst & Young Sulaiman Nishtar stated that an arbitrarily increased tax rate would reap disastrous consequences.
Well, the question of having more room to tax corporates obviously depends on particular corporates' ability to pay as opposed to the individual. So what I believe is that we need to do a very detailed analysis on which segments of the economy are capable of paying more taxes, which are actually struggling at the moment, and which will actually come forward to pay tax. I don't believe a detailed analysis has been done as to which segments are actually prospering, which segments are struggling, and which areas of the economy actually can afford to pay the tax. And that was what was, I think, recommended in the budget as well, to have a taxation commission that would look at in detail which segments can afford to pay, because in an economy of $80 billion, which is not shrinking, which segments are contributing to the tax of, I think, under 10% of GDP is what we collected last. Without doing a mathematical calculation of how the tax is going to come, it's certainly not going to work, because it's going to seriously affect certain segments that are not having the ability to pay, and that's a key principle in taxation. If you're a corporate, let's say an SME, imports, for example, they're an importer and seller, they would automatically go to 30%. And as a result of import restrictions, for example, their business would struggle. Increasing a 30% to an additional 35 or 36 would certainly be detriment. On the other hand, if it's a business that's prospering, then of course increasing corporate rates, I think the corporate itself should come forward in a larger conversation with the Ministry of Finance, agree to pay higher amount, because if not, the whole system is going to suffer. So,
further expressing his views on corporate tax evasion, he stated that companies would prioritize survival over paying taxes.
So certainly if taxes become unbearable, there is going to be a tendency to evade, and that is not something you can stop, because the first thing a business or individual would do is survival. Taxes is not a priority, it is survival. So if someone needs money for survival, the money is going to get diverted to those expenses rather than paying taxes. So even if you take a company that's really struggling, you would see that the VAT would be in arrears. Although the VAT is collected from the customer, the cash first goes to settle your dues to enable the business to survive. Taxation is secondary, survival is of course first. So definitely if it is done in a mathematical way, you want a certain number, you take a number of taxpayers and you multiply it by a tax rate, and you expect that, and you paint everybody with that same brush, certainly evasion would be rampant.
Now, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka reports that inflation as recorded by the National Consumer Price Index stood at 58.2% in January 2023. Now, this compilation was done by the Department of Census and Statistics subsequent to the rebasing of the National Index of Inflation to 2021 from its previous base year of 2019. Meanwhile, the Central Bank also highlighted that so far during the year, the Sri Lankan rupee appreciated against the US dollar by 0.1%. It also appreciated against the euro, yen and the pound, while depreciating against the Indian rupee.
Effective from January 2023, the Department of Census and Statistics rebased the National Consumer Price Index with a new base year and discontinued the calculation of inflation using 2013 as its base year. Accordingly, the new base year of the compilation of inflation data under the NCPI is 2021. As per the new rebased index on a year-on-year basis, NCPI-based headline inflation was recorded at 53.2% in January 2023. Food inflation stood at 53.6%, while the non-food inflation was recorded at 52.9% in January 2023. Monthly change of the NCPI was recorded at 0.69% in January 2023, mainly due to price increases observed in items of food and non-food categories, which amounted to 0.8% and 0.6% respectively. Furthermore, the NCPI-based core inflation recorded at 52% in January 2023. Highlighting the developments in the monetary sector during the period under review, the CBSL reports that the weekly average weighted prime lending rate for the week ending yesterday decreased by 114 basis points to 24.21% compared to the previous week. Meanwhile, reserve money decreased compared to the previous week mainly due to the decreases in deposits held by commercial banks with the central bank. Total outstanding market liquidity was a deficit of 53.937 billion rupees by yesterday compared to a deficit of 125.151 billion rupees by the end of last week. Meanwhile, in the secondary markets, the all-share price index increased by 5.28% to 9,315.87 points, and the S&P SL20 index increased by 4.45% to 2,833.45 points compared to the index values of last week. On the performance of the external sector, the central bank highlights that during the year up to yesterday, the Sri Lankan rupee appreciated against the US dollar by 0.1%. In the meantime, given the cross-currency exchange rate movements, the Sri Lankan rupee appreciated against the Japanese yen by 1.7%, the euro by 0.7%, and the sterling pound by 0.3%, while depreciating against the Indian rupee by 0.4% during the period under review.
Now, the chief of the International Monetary Fund said today that the group of 20 nations have some disagreements over restructuring debt for distressed economies, adding that banning private cryptocurrencies should be an option. These views were shared by the IMF chief at the G20 Finance Ministers Summit currently taking place in India.
India's G20 presidency comes as its neighbours Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Pakistan are seeking urgent IMF funds due to an economic slowdown caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war. China, the world's largest bilateral creditor, urged a group of big economies yesterday to conduct a fair, objective and in-depth analysis of the causes of global debt issues as clamour grows for lenders to take a large haircut or accept losses on loans. Speaking on the recently commissioned Debt Roundtable, the IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva highlighted that a session was recently conducted where it was clear that there is a commitment to bridge differences for the benefit of countries. Apart from restructuring debt, regulating cryptocurrencies is another priority area for India, which Georgieva agreed with. Georgieva stated that it was important to differentiate between the central bank digital currencies that are backed by the state and stablecoins and crypto assets that are privately issued. Speaking further on the matter, she highlighted that it was important to push for regulation as a delay in doing so could pose a risk to financial stability. Meanwhile, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said she had not suggested the outright banning of crypto activities, but it was critical to put in place a strong regulatory framework.
And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Subscribe to our social media pages to stay updated on the latest news. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.